She stood at the far end of the table, silent, unnoticed. He was in the center, pouring drinks and laughing with the men who admired him. When someone asked what she did, he didn't blink. She tries. They laughed. She didn't. That night, she left everything. Not in a rage, not in tears, but with stillness that shook the house more than any slammed door. Months later, his new hotel opened. He walked in and froze. The scent, the detail, the warmth. And there she was, by the grand floral piece she curated. Dress soft, eyes sharper, name now known. He said, "It feels like home." She smiled. "That was always my gift." Welcome to Mr. Charles Stories. Today's story is about something far more dangerous than betrayal. It's what happens when the woman they underestimated becomes the woman they can't reach anymore. Brielle wasn't loud. She didn't argue. She didn't break plates or plead for love. She simply left, quietly, and built an empire with everything he dismissed. This story is for the people who've been told they're too quiet, too soft, too slow, too small. This is what happens when someone stops shrinking to make another person feel big. Grab your seat. You're about to witness one of the most graceful rises ever told. Let's begin chapter. The shift didn't happen loudly. Brielle didn't storm through the penthouse or scream into her pillow. She simply began waking up an hour earlier. Not to make breakfast, not for him, but for her. She'd sit by the window while the city was still half asleep and sip her tea while scrolling through old mood boards she once saved back in school. Textures, floor patterns, light forms. Back then, she didn't have the money to create those kinds of spaces, but she had the eye. She had the patience. And now, she had nothing left to lose. For days, she said nothing to Nolan. He was too busy bouncing between meetings, wine-tasting events, and late-night networking. When he was home, he spoke in bullet points. "Where's my Navy suit? When's that dinner with board partners? Did my assistant confirm the driver?" He never asked how she was doing. Not once. What he didn't know, what he didn't bother to notice, was that every time he left, she opened her laptop and sketched quietly. She worked on small design proposals, did free mood boards for community businesses around Harlem and Brooklyn. She created in the quiet. It wasn't about clients. It was about remembering what her hands could still do, what her vision still held, what her name still meant to her, even if he forgot. A week passed, then two. That's when Nolan walked in while she was on the phone. He wasn't supposed to be home, but he came back early and heard her speaking in the living room. She had just finished discussing wall panel options with a woman who ran a bookstore-turned-wine bar on Fulton. The owner loved Brielle's suggestions, said she'd never thought of using natural light that way. When Brielle hung up, she felt alive, until she heard Nolan laugh. A dry, low chuckle. He was leaning against the doorway in his usual custom suit. Expensive watch. That same air of entitlement he wore better than cologne. "You're playing house with side projects?" he asked. She turned to face him. Still, calm, like always. "I'm not playing," she said softly. "I'm designing. Working." He crossed his arms. "That's cute." He meant it as an insult. He didn't think she noticed the disdain layered in his voice. But she did. She tilted her head slightly, not angry. Clear. "You laugh now. But one day you'll call it a brand." He stared at her for a beat longer than expected, like he wasn't sure if she was joking or serious. Then, as usual, he shrugged and walked away. But she meant every word. In fact, that night, she renamed the folder on her laptop. No more design experiments. She called it Still House. It came to her in a moment of stillness, watching the city lights flicker while everyone else chased loud success. Still House, a name born from surviving without applause, a name for people who didn't need to yell to exist, a name that reflected her. She didn't tell Nolan. She didn't need to. 2 weeks later came the brunch. Holiday season. Nolan had invited his usual circle, elite partners, their curated wives, and the newer investors hoping to sit closer to his orbit. They met at a rooftop venue he co-owned in Tribeca. glass walls, gold accents, views that looked good on social media. Brielle wore a sand-colored jumpsuit, soft linen, no logos. She didn't want attention. She wanted air. She walked behind Nolan like always, letting him do the handshakes and perform his practiced charisma. She found her seat, quiet, calm. Midway through brunch, after a few cocktails were passed around, one of the women leaned toward Brielle and asked, "So what do you do these days?" She wasn't being rude, just making small talk. Brielle opened her mouth, but Nolan answered for her. "She tries." The table laughed. Polite, controlled chuckles from people who didn't want to seem too amused, yet couldn't hide the smirks. Brielle looked at him, dead on, straight through. She didn't flinch. She didn't respond. She just smiled, not wide, not fake. It was the kind of smile that knew it was the last time. That night, Nolan didn't notice anything different. He tossed his keys on the console, removed his jacket, went straight to the bathroom, muttering something about how those people are exhausting. Brielle moved through the bedroom quietly. She took her time. She folded her gold hoops, pulled the linen napkin from her clutch, the one used at brunch, and wrapped her wedding ring inside. She placed it gently on the center of the entry table. Next to it, her house key. She didn't leave a note. She didn't take a suitcase. No drama, no fight, just her ID, her phone, and her peace. She closed the door behind her at 10:43 p.m. The only sound was the soft click of the latch. Nolan didn't notice until morning. He woke up late. The bedroom was too quiet. He called out her name once, then checked the closet, then the kitchen, then the foyer, and saw the ring, wrapped in napkin, resting beside her key. He stood there, staring at it for a full 3 minutes, not blinking. Then he picked up his phone, dialed her. Straight to voicemail. He called again. Same thing. He didn't know it yet. But this was the beginning of a silence louder than anything he had ever said to her. The morning after she left felt like oxygen. Brielle stood outside the tiny rental she found in Newark. It wasn't much, a narrow walk-up tucked behind a corner bakery and an old church. The floors creaked. The walls needed fresh paint. But the sunlight hit differently here. It felt like a beginning. No concierge, no marble elevator, no view of the skyline. But it was hers, fully, quietly, undoubtedly hers. She dropped her bag on the floor and looked around. One window, a scratched table, and a deep breath she hadn't taken in years. Her first night alone, she didn't cry. She didn't pour wine or play sad music. She rolled up her sleeves, scrubbed the baseboards, pulled her hair into a puff, and started sketching how she'd transform the space, not for resale, not for social media, but for herself. She taped mood boards to the walls with painter's tape. Warm tones, salvaged textures, cotton drapes, open shelving, light that hit your skin and made you remember who you were. The next morning, she reached out to her old design mentor, Professor Langston. He had always told her, "Soft doesn't mean small. You design like someone who sees people." He hadn't heard from her in years. She was scared he'd forgotten her. He hadn't. "Brielle Linton," he said on the call. "The one who used to rearrange my office furniture after every lecture?" She laughed. "I think I lost that girl." He paused. "Then go find her. The world needs her work." He gave her names of small business owners in the city who needed help but couldn't afford real design firms. Boutique owners, cafes, one woman who ran a hair salon in the Bronx. They weren't glamorous clients, but they were real. Brielle offered to consult for free. In exchange, they let her share photos of her work and credit her. They agreed, grateful, overwhelmed, some even in tears. In return, Brielle got exactly what she needed. Purpose. Her days were simple. Wake up at 6, stretch, tea with cinnamon and oat milk, sketching, hands-on visits, then evenings filled with sandpaper and mood lighting. Her favorite client was Tati, a Dominican single mom who ran a plant and poetry shop in East Harlem. Tati cried when Brielle installed corner light shelves with tiny notes tucked between vines. "You made my store feel like my grandma's hugs," she whispered. That night, Brielle stood at the train platform, hoodie up, tears in her eyes, but not from sadness, from being seen again. She began posting photos of her work online, no filters, no name drops, just still house, built from softness, designed to hold you. She didn't say her last name, didn't say where she came from, but women found her anyway. They commented, "I feel this. This feels like home. Whoever you are, thank you." One woman wrote, "I was called a loser too. Still here." The comment stayed with Brielle for days. She framed it and placed it by her window. It reminded her why she left, why she stayed gone. Nolan's voice didn't echo in this space. His shadow didn't fit through this door. He had silenced her by pretending her thoughts were noise. Now, strangers were calling her vision necessary, and she didn't miss the penthouse. She missed herself. But now, she was finding her. One afternoon, while waiting for paint to dry in a small photography studio she was redesigning, Brielle opened her messages and saw a DM from a woman named Ania. It read, "Your work makes me feel safe. I have a studio opening soon. Would love your energy." Brielle clicked on her profile. The woman owned a popular wellness space for women of color in Harlem. Brielle said yes, not for exposure, but because something inside her whispered, "This matters." That same night, she got a text from a number she hadn't blocked, but had buried. "Nolan. Nolan. Law firm's asking for your updated address. You changed it on bank records." She stared at it for a moment, then replied with 2 words. "Brielle, use email." That was it. She didn't explain, didn't soften, didn't offer anything else. He didn't respond. She put her phone down and returned to painting. She was in the middle of brushing a soft sage tone across a reclaimed wooden frame when the words hit her. "Still house isn't a project. It's me." She said it out loud, like an affirmation, like truth spoken back into her bones. She smiled. Tears didn't fall, but her hands trembled, not from fear, from freedom. It started with a riposte. A woman in Jersey City owned a boutique hotel that was struggling to attract younger, creative guests. She'd seen one of Brielle's design photos, specifically a reading nook in Tati's plant shop, lit by soft amber wall sconces and framed with found wood and second-hand poetry books. The caption had read, "Stillness is a room that doesn't beg to be looked at. It welcomes you without needing your permission." It wasn't flashy, no before and after reels, no influencer endorsements. But the hotel owner, Morgan, read that caption 3 times. Then she sent an email. "Morgan Wills, hi, I saw your work at Still House. I don't know if you work commercially, but I need help. Our lobby feels cold, and we've tried 3 designers who only care about photo ops. You design like you listen. Would you be willing to visit? No agent, no assistant, just her name, her number, her ask." Brielle stared at the message for a full minute, then replied, "Brielle, yes. Send me your availability." The first time she walked into the Oaks Hotel, it felt like a second chance. The space was sleek but sterile. Everything was grey on grey. It looked like a showroom, not a space where anyone could feel held. Morgan was mid-30s, kind, flustered, and deeply honest. "We paid a top firm last year," she said. "All design, no soul. I want people to breathe when they walk in, not just take pictures." Brielle nodded. "I don't decorate. I build peace." Morgan smiled. "Good. Because this place needs it." Brielle got to work. She didn't send digital drafts or PDF proposals. She walked the space in silence first, took notes by hand, sat in the corners during the day, and then again at night. She asked Morgan questions no one else had. "What scent do you want people to remember when they leave? What's one memory you wish this space could hold? What kind of conversation do you want strangers to have here?" Then she designed layered lighting, Mixed textures, books on low shelves, real plants, not trendy ones, neutral palettes warmed by candlelight. She named the redesign the breathing room, and that name, soft and quiet, began to ripple. Guests started staying longer, tagging the space online, reviewing it not for the aesthetics, but for how they felt. Morgan cried the day they reopened. "You gave me more than a design," she said. "You gave this place its heart." Brielle didn't cry, but later that night, sitting on the floor of her Newark apartment, she held her knees to her chest and whispered, "I'm not invisible anymore." From there, word traveled fast, not because she chased it, because the women she helped told the truth. Stillhouse did our waiting room, and now people stay even after their appointments. Brielle designed our yoga space. It's like therapy in paint form. She doesn't just work. She listens. Her inbox filled. She didn't reply to every message. She was still careful, still guarded. But she picked the ones that felt right. Each new project became more than a job. It became proof that her softness wasn't something to outgrow. It was a gift, one Nolan had never valued. Then came the magazine. One of her clients, Ania, the wellness center owner, had connections at a black-owned lifestyle publication called Rooted Living. They featured Brielle's design work in their Quiet Creators issue. A full spread, photos of her spaces, quotes about her process, a side profile shot of her standing in the breathing room, arms crossed, gold rings gleaming in soft light. The title read, "The Soft Force Behind Stillhouse." Brielle didn't post it. She didn't need to. The story posted itself. And that's when Nolan saw it. He was scrolling on his phone in a chauffeur-driven SUV. An investor had casually dropped the name Stillhouse in a conversation. Nolan hadn't recognized it. But something about the tone made him pause. So he searched, and there she was, her face, her work, her story. No mention of him, not a single reference, but the ring on her finger was gone. And the confidence in her eyes, that was new. He put his phone down, said nothing. The driver glanced at him in the mirror. Nolan's jaw clenched, his fingers tapped, but he didn't speak. Because for the first time in a long time, Nolan Creed was realizing she hadn't just left. She had outgrown him. Later that evening, he opened his email and saw a notice about a scheduled walkthrough at one of his new hotel acquisitions. The subject line read, "Final Design Review, The Madison, Lobby Plus Suites by Stillhouse." He blinked. Stillhouse. It wasn't just a brand now. It was on his calendar. Have you ever walked away not to prove a point, but to protect your peace? Have you ever been called small, and then built something no one could ignore? If Brielle's quiet rise spoke to you, hit that like button, comment "still here" if you've ever had. To start over in silence, and subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more stories that feel like truth. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is peace. The invitation came in a white linen envelope, elegant, embossed, predictable. Nolan was hosting his annual winter brunch. It was one of his signature events, where partners brought their spouses. Investors paraded polished charm, and image was everything. Brielle had attended every year. She knew the drill. Wear quiet luxury. Speak only when asked. Smile on cue. But this time, she wasn't the same woman who used to stand behind him in photos. This time, she had a decision to make. She almost didn't go. Her life was busy now. She had active clients, a new project in Harlem. Stillhouse was growing. But part of her needed closure, not to confront, not to prove, but to observe, to witness for herself just how far she'd drifted from the woman who once begged for his attention in rooms like that. So she went, wore soft linen, not satin, gold bangles, simple slides, no makeup, just skin she finally felt comfortable in. She walked in alone. No one noticed her at first, not even Nolan. And that said everything. The venue was pristine, glass walls and artificial fireplaces, every detail manicured like a catalogue. Brielle walked past a table of women sipping mimosas and nodding to each other's hair and handbags. She found her seat near the end of a long rectangular table. It was the same spot she'd been seated the year before, and the year before that, but she wasn't the same. The brunch moved slowly. Laughter came in waves. Topics ranged from stocks to ski trips. At one point, someone asked Nolan about his firm's new hotel in Midtown. He nodded with pride. Full acquisition. Redesigns underway, he said. We're bringing in something called Still House to finish it. Brielle didn't move, didn't speak. Not yet. Then a tall woman with a glittering ring leaned across the table and looked straight at her. And what about you, sweetheart? What do you do these days? A kind question, no malice. Brielle opened her mouth, but Nolan beat her to it. He didn't look at her, didn't pause, didn't care. She tries, he said, chuckling lightly. The table laughed, not cruelly, but passively, like his words had given them permission to overlook her too. And in that moment, something inside Brielle settled. She smiled, not from pain, not from anger, from decision. She didn't finish her food. She stood up during dessert, quietly, politely. No scene, no announcement. I'm stepping out, she whispered to the woman next to her. And then she left, through the main entrance, through the cold winter air, into the kind of silence she finally welcomed. When she got back to her Newark apartment, she didn't pace. She folded her gold bangles, took her wedding ring from her finger and placed it in a linen napkin, one they had used at their wedding reception. White, crisp, folded like closure. She placed the napkin on the entry table, right beside her house key. Then she zipped her purse, slid on her coat, and opened the door. She didn't take a suitcase, didn't look back. She left everything behind, except herself. That night, Nolan walked into the penthouse without even realizing she was gone. He hung up his coat, kicked off his shoes, and opened a bottle of wine. He didn't call out for her. He didn't ask why the lights were off in the bedroom. He didn't check her side of the closet. But the next morning, when he walked past the entry table, he saw the folded napkin, neat, soft, and hollow. The ring inside caught the sunlight. The key beside it said everything. And for the first time in years, Nolan Creed stood still. He called her. Once, then again. Voicemail. He stared at his screen for a long moment, then tossed the phone on the couch. The penthouse was quiet, and for once, he felt it. Nolan didn't tell anyone she left. He carried on like she was still around, like her absence was temporary. He told himself she'd call, that she was being dramatic, that she just needed a few days to cool off. But she didn't call. And it wasn't a few days. 2 weeks passed. Then a third, and slowly, the quiet in his life stopped feeling convenient. He noticed her missing in small, unexpected ways. No more cups of hot tea left on the marble counter after his workouts. No fresh towels folded on the bench in the bathroom. No quiet voice asking if he'd eaten that day, not because she had to care, but because she always did. He opened his closet one morning and found a photo tucked in the back of the shelf. Brielle on a beach in Montauk, barefoot, laughing at something out of frame. She looked undone in the best way. Free, soft, alive. He placed the photo face down, but he didn't throw it out. Meanwhile, in Newark, Brielle wasn't waiting for anything. She moved through her space with purpose. Paint on her hands, blueprints on the floor, sketches taped across walls. Her apartment was her first project. She repurposed a discarded wooden dresser and turned it into a window bench, sanded every inch by hand, painted it muted clay, then placed a single throw pillow in the corner with the stitched phrase, "Still here." That pillow would become the first item in her Still House line. She just didn't know it yet. In the mornings, she worked. In the afternoons, she visited sites. And in the evenings, she responded to DMs from women who had read about her in Rooted Living. Some messaged to ask about pricing. Some messaged to share stories. Some messaged to say nothing, just a heart emoji or, "You give me hope." She always responded, not with rehearsed lines, but with real care. "Thank you for seeing me," she wrote to one. Because that's what this was about now, being seen, not for who she was to someone, but for what she carried in her own right. One day, while finalizing fabric swatches in her kitchen, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "Hi. Is this Brielle Linton?" A voice asked, warm but tentative. "Yes, speaking. This is Devon Knight. I'm with the creative lead team for the Collective." Brielle paused. She knew the name. The Collective was a private workspace and think tank for creative entrepreneurs and wellness brands in Harlem. Stylish, soulful, selective. "I got your info from Ania," he continued. "We're doing a full redesign. We want still house." Brielle's throat tightened. She almost said she was busy, almost passed it off. But then she said, "I'm listening." The walkthrough happened 3 days later. The space was raw. Exposed beams, untouched floors, a canvas waiting for meaning. She ran her fingers along the ridged wood and closed her eyes. "What are you thinking?" Devon asked. Brielle opened her eyes. "I'm thinking of softness that honors history, a place where ambition doesn't need to shout." He nodded slowly. "You're not like other designers." "I'm not designing for Instagram," she said. "I'm designing for healing." He smiled. Welcome to the project. Still House was no longer just Brielle and her vision. She now had a purpose that moved through other people's spaces and hearts. She onboarded a freelance assistant named Kari, soft-spoken, full of ideas, and fresh out of design school. A woman who reminded her of herself 10 years earlier. They met every morning at a cafe in Newark, planned logistics, swapped samples, laughed about the chaos. For the first time in years, Brielle didn't feel drained by collaboration. She felt energized, respected, and safe. Meanwhile, Nolan's days turned repetitive. He took more meetings, signed more contracts, posted more polished moments online. But at night, in that penthouse, he found himself glancing at the empty space on the bed's left side. Not because he was lonely, but because it had never really been about being alone. It had been about feeling unseen, and he realized she had felt that for years, right beside him. He finally told his assistant, "Don't book me for the Still House walkthrough. I don't want it to be awkward." His assistant looked confused. "You're not going to the hotel review?" He shook his head. "She doesn't need me to show up now." And that was the first honest thing Nolan had said in a long time. The Collective's redesign wasn't just a project. It was a chance to honor women who'd never been centered. Women who made space for others while never asking for it themselves. Brielle walked through the Harlem space slowly on her first full day. Kari trailed beside her, notebook in hand. "People will expect white walls," Brielle murmured. "Exposed brick, Edison bulbs. Minimalism with no soul." Kari nodded. "What are you thinking instead?" Brielle ran her hand along a raw beam. "I'm thinking warmth, earth, stillness. A place where black and brown women don't have to shrink to feel invited." She designed slowly. Not from trend boards, but from memory. She thought of her grandmother's house in Savannah, sunlight on cotton curtains, of the poetry book her mother once kept beside the couch, of how she used to light candles and reframe corners of her apartment, just to feel peace. Still House wasn't about performing luxury. It was about choosing softness as survival. The Collective's founders were stunned by her first draft. "We thought you'd pitch us a brand kit," Devon said. "You brought us a memory." Brielle smiled. "I'm not here to decorate. I'm here to protect." Every corner of the space told a story. The entry featured a circular bench built from reclaimed oak, designed for women to sit in full view of each other, no one placed behind, no one made smaller. The walls were painted in layered tones, caramel, clay, and deep moss. No sharp whites, no cold greys. A shelf near the kitchen held small, unbranded candles and handwritten notes. "Today is enough. You don't have to be louder to be valid." There was no spotlight, no focal wall, because the entire space was sacred. The opening event wasn't loud. No champagne tower, no step and repeat. Just a soft gathering of women in comfortable clothes and full hearts. They walked in and slowed down, visibly, emotionally. One woman whispered to another, "I feel like I can exhale here." Someone else posted a photo of a reading corner with the caption, "This place," was clearly designed by someone who knows what it's like to be tired. That photo went viral. It wasn't tagged, but people found Brielle. Her follower count doubled in a week. Requests came in from Atlanta, Chicago, DC. She didn't respond to all of them. She wasn't chasing. But Still House was now a name. Nolan noticed the shift too. One morning during a board briefing, a junior exec brought up the Harlem project. "Who's the designer again?" one of the partners asked. The intern responded before Nolan could speak. "She's incredible. Still House. Her name is Brielle Linton." Nolan looked up slowly, but he said nothing. Because what could he say? That the woman they were praising used to sit beside him while he ignored her voice. He excused himself early that day, told them he had a scheduling conflict. He didn't. He just needed air. Brielle didn't know about the meeting, didn't care. She was in her Newark apartment, barefoot, focused, reviewing hand-stitched throw samples from a black-owned textile company in Philly. Kari was curled up in the reading chair. "People are calling Still House a movement now," she said, scrolling her phone. Brielle chuckled. "I'm just designing rooms." Kari looked up. "No, you're making people feel safe." That silenced the moment, not in awkwardness. Later that night, Brielle opened an envelope she'd been avoiding. It was from a property developer in Boston. Big budget, bigger names. An opportunity to take Still House to a national stage. She read the letter 3 times, then folded it. She didn't say yes, not yet, because for the first time in her life, Brielle wasn't rushing toward opportunity. She was letting it come to her, and choosing carefully what deserved her energy. Still House wasn't just growing, it was blooming, and every root was hers. It wasn't supposed to be a headline. Still House wasn't chasing press. Brielle hadn't hired a publicist. There were no press kits, no pitch decks. But word travels when it speaks to people's pain, and then heals it. 3 weeks after the collective's opening, an op-ed dropped on a major lifestyle site titled, "The Designer Making Space for Women Who've Been Ignored." It wasn't flashy, but it was raw, real, and centered every woman who had ever walked into a room and felt like a shadow. They quoted Brielle, "Design isn't just what you see, it's what you're allowed to feel when no one's interrupting you." The piece didn't name Nolan, but it named her worth, loudly. By then, Still House had already begun receiving offers from companies that had once rejected her. High-end office spaces, hotels. One brand even offered to license the Still House name for a new furniture line. Brielle declined, not because she wasn't honored, but because she remembered what it felt like to be in a room, fully present, and still made invisible. She wasn't letting that happen again. Her team expanded. Kari became full-time. They brought on a production assistant named Mesa, smart, intuitive, recently laid off from a commercial firm that didn't value softness. Brielle knew that feeling too well. "We don't hustle here," she told them. "We work with care. We rest. We listen." They nodded. Still House became more than a studio. It became refuge. The Newark apartment that had been Brielle's sanctuary now held morning meetings, packaging, supplies, and a wall full of handwritten thank you notes from clients across the country. They framed them like awards. Because they were. Meanwhile, Nolan's empire was thriving on paper. New acquisitions, new deals, new headlines. But internally, he felt it. The subtle shift. Conversations that used to begin with his name now started with hers. "Have you seen what Still House did in Atlanta? I heard they're booked till next fall. Someone said she's opening her own showroom in DC. He overheard one of his newest board members say during a site tour, "We need a design team that gets people, you know, like Still House." He smiled like he agreed, but his stomach tightened. Nolan hadn't reached out since the day she left. Not directly, but he followed quietly, saw the stories, the images, the tone. What shook him wasn't her success. It was her silence. She hadn't mentioned him. Not once. Not in interviews. Not online. Not in passing. She had rebuilt a world where he never existed. And somehow, that hurt more than if she'd dragged his name through the mud. One night, in his penthouse, Nolan stood in the middle of the living room. No sound, no voice, no scent of tea steeping in the kitchen, just concrete quiet. He sat down and scrolled through her feature in Rooted Living again. Her eyes, her stillness. There was no rage in her, no spite, just peace. The kind he never knew how to give her. Across the river, Brielle was wrapping up final staging for a wellness cafe in Brooklyn. She walked through the space with Mesa, checking corner lighting and scent diffusers. At the back of the room was a small plaque carved into wood. It read, "Soft doesn't mean small." Mesa touched it. "This feels like a hug." Brielle smiled. That's the goal. Later that night, her inbox pinged. It was a message from an unexpected source, the board of a luxury hotel brand Nolan's company had partnered with years ago. They'd gone in a new direction, wanted Still House to handle the redesign for their flagship property in Los Angeles. They were prepared to match her highest quote. She forwarded it to Kari. No words. Just the subject line. This time, we lead. Still House was now a name whispered in boardrooms, not as an option, but as the standard. And Brielle? She still wore soft cotton, still led with calm, still answered her DMs when she had time. The difference? Now the world listened without her needing to raise her voice. The Madison Hotel was one of Nolan Creed's newest acquisitions, modern, sleek, centrally located. Perfect for tech retreats and boutique conferences. He didn't handle the design team this time, delegated it. He had been too busy finalizing another high-rise and smoothing over a legal mess with a property in Miami. So when his assistant told him the renovation was complete and scheduled him for a walkthrough, he didn't check the details. He showed up at noon, in a tailored navy suit, phone in one hand, watch in the other, thinking about everything except her. The minute he stepped through the lobby doors, he paused. The light was different, not bright, not dim, warm. The scent was subtle, something like burnt vanilla and soft moss, a blend that didn't overpower but made the air feel kind. The flooring had changed, textured stone underfoot, layered with earthy-toned rugs that led the eye gently, not forcefully. And the walls, they weren't blank, they breathed. Soft clay color, framed by wooden trim and woven art that looked handmade, not ordered. He blinked. His fingers stopped scrolling. Something about the space felt familiar. He kept walking. Guests sat in curved lounge chairs, not facing a TV, but each other. A corner shelf held poetry books. Above it, a carved message, "You deserve to be still." His heart stuttered. Then he saw her, at the far end of the lobby, in a sand-colored jumpsuit, gold earrings, braided bun, tablet in hand. She was speaking to a staff member, adjusting a floor lamp angle slightly. She wasn't posing, wasn't trying to be seen. But she was radiant, confident, soft, unreachable. Nolan froze. For a moment, all the movement in the lobby dimmed. The sound, the shuffle of guests, the clicks of heels, everything hushed. He took a slow step forward. Brielle turned, mid-sentence. Their eyes met. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't smile. She simply looked at him, like a stranger who once meant something distant, something she had let go of without hate. He walked toward her slowly. She tucked her tablet under one arm and waited. When he reached her, he spoke first. "You did this?" he asked, voice low. She tilted her head slightly. "Still House was contracted," she said. "Yes." He looked around again. Let the space settle around him. "It feels like home." Her response came without pause. That was the goal. They stood in silence for a beat longer. Then she nodded politely. Enjoy your stay. She didn't turn back, didn't ask about his life, didn't remind him of what they had shared. She didn't need to, because this time she wasn't asking to be seen. She already knew who she was. Nolan stood there for a long time, long after she disappeared into the side corridor, long after the front desk resumed normal greetings, long after the weight in his chest reminded him she didn't just leave him. She rebuilt a life so full, he didn't even fit inside it anymore. He left the hotel early, didn't complete the full walkthrough, told his assistant to handle the rest. That night, he sat in his penthouse, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows. Behind him, the walls were cold, impressive, empty. He picked up his phone, typed her name into his messages, then deleted it. Because he finally understood, she didn't block him. She outgrew the need to hear from him again. That night, Nolan didn't sleep, not from heartbreak, not from jealousy, but from a sharp, growing awareness that she had changed in ways he could no longer interpret. He had known her when she whispered. Now her silence felt complete. He stared at the ceiling. The shadows from the city lights stretched long across his bedroom walls. At 2:11 a.m., he unlocked his phone. The last message he'd ever sent her was still there. I was wrong. I see you now. No reply. He hovered over the text bar, typed, "It was good to see you today." Then deleted it. Typed again, "You did beautiful work." Then deleted that too. Finally, he wrote, "Are you open to catching up?" He stared at it for nearly 5 minutes. Then hit send. The message marked, delivered. She read it the next morning, didn't reply. Over the next week, he sent more. Short ones. "There's still a lot I never said. You were right. I should have seen you when I had you." No reply. So, he sent flowers. 24 pale peonies in a tall glass vase. A note, "No one ever made my house feel like home but you." They arrived at Stillhouse's Newark workspace on a Wednesday. Kari signed for them. Brielle didn't open the card. She placed the bouquet in the staff room. A day later, she donated them to the women's shelter down the street. Nolan followed her online, not publicly, quietly. Stillhouse had released a new collection for the quiet ones. Hand-stitched pillows, reclaimed benches, softly lit wall pieces. They sold out in under 48 hours. A short video featured Brielle seated in a newly completed space. Soft music in the background. Kari interviewing her off-camera. "What do you want people to feel when they enter a Stillhouse space?" Brielle smiled, uninterrupted. He watched it 3 times. She hadn't raised her voice, but it echoed through him. The next morning, he wrote a letter, handwritten. No logo, no signature, just ink and truth. "Brielle, I thought success made me worthy. You always knew peace was the real wealth. I didn't see that. I didn't see you. I didn't know what I had. I'm sorry I made you feel invisible. I see you now. I hope that matters." He didn't mail it. Instead, he had it delivered through a private courier, inside a plain envelope. No return address. Stillhouse staff accepted it on his behalf. Kari brought it to Brielle that afternoon. "This came for you." Brielle opened it. Read it once, then again, then folded it neatly. She didn't cry, didn't smile. She simply stood, walked into her office, and slid the letter into a wood frame. She hung it on a small wall labeled, "Where I Started." It sat beside her first set of design sketches, a fabric swatch from her Newark apartment, and a sticky note that read, "She tries." Kari saw the new frame later and paused. "You saved it." Brielle nodded. "It doesn't hurt." "Not anymore." Kari tilted her head. "Will you respond?" Brielle looked at the letter, then back at her desk. "No, I already did. Just by becoming someone he can't interrupt anymore." That weekend, Stillhouse hosted a quiet brunch for the women it had worked with. Small business owners, artists, mothers, daughters, designers, survivors. No media, no announcements, just a garden rooftop, soft jazz, and a community built in love, not noise. Brielle stood by the long wood table, arms folded gently. Someone asked, "Do you ever miss who you were before all this?" She looked around, at the smiles, at the healing, at the stillness, then shook her head. "I'm still her." She just stopped waiting to be chosen. The still house studio was busier now. Clients booked 3 months out. Consultations happened back to back. Fabric samples came in by the dozen. But Brielle never let the pace strip her peace. Each morning, she still lit the same candle, drank her tea, reviewed every design herself. She didn't want Still House to grow into something she no longer recognized, and that's why she said yes to the Midtown project. It wasn't the biggest, wasn't the flashiest, but it had promise. The client was a design firm working on a mixed-use space, part cafe, part gallery, part retail, and the lead architect, Corinne Hayes. She met him on a grey afternoon. They gathered around a long planning table with sketches, render mock-ups and site photos. Brielle arrived early, as always. Corinne walked in exactly on time. Late 30s, clean cut, quiet energy. A simple navy shirt rolled at the sleeves. No loud entrances. When he sat across from her, he didn't dominate the table. He glanced at her notes, then waited for her to speak. "I like what you proposed here," Brielle said, pointing to a skylight section. "But your circulation path pulls too much focus from the seating zones." Corinne nodded. "You're right. You want softness in the flow." She looked up. "Exactly." He smiled. Didn't think anyone would catch that. She didn't smile back. Just wrote something on her notepad. But internally something shifted. He saw the details she thought only she noticed. Over the next few weeks they worked together more closely. He didn't rush meetings, didn't talk over her, never once corrected her choices in front of clients. And when he offered input, it was always phrased like a suggestion, not a command. She appreciated that. She didn't need to be handled. She just needed someone who didn't assume they knew more simply because they spoke first. One afternoon, while testing wood tones for an entry bench, he asked, "Do you ever design for yourself? Like, just for your own joy?" Brielle paused. She hadn't been asked that in a long time. "I did. Once," she said. "My first apartment, before Still House became Still House. What did it look like?" She smiled faintly. Quiet, warm, reclaimed wood. Lots of corners. He tilted his head. "Like your work now?" "No," she said. "My work now reflects other people. That space was mine." He nodded slowly. "Sounds like it's time you had one again." Brielle didn't respond, but the words followed her into the evening. That night, while wiping down her desk, she opened a blank file. Labeled it, Brielle's room, undisturbed. Working with Corinne didn't feel heavy. It felt balanced. Some days they worked in total silence, notes exchanged with nods and pencils. Other days they joked about building a meditation lounge inside a shipping container just to see what Pinterest would do with it. He asked questions, but never prodded. She offered answers, but never more than she wanted to share. That kind of rhythm was rare and comforting. On a Thursday, after a 6-hour install, they stood by the entrance of the gallery space. The light hit just right. The chairs had been placed in clusters. The scent of cedar drifted through the vents. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, just watching it settle. He waited, then said, "I like working with you." Her eyes met his. "Why?" "You don't over-explain. You trust the work, and you don't pretend to be anyone else." She let the silence sit between them, then replied, "I like working with you too." They left it there. No flirting, no lines, just honesty, and something slowly building under the surface. Later that week, Kari mentioned it while packing samples. "So, this architect guy, Corinne." Brielle raised a brow. "What about him? I've seen the way he looks at you when you're not watching." Brielle smirked. "I'm not watching." Kari grinned. "But I am." Brielle didn't respond, didn't need to, because a part of her had noticed too. They didn't plan it. It started with a message from Corinne on a Saturday evening. "Corinne, You ever been to the salvage market on Delancey? Brielle read the message and waited a beat, then typed, once. Years ago. Another beat. Corinne, I'm going tomorrow. You in? No emojis. No pressure. Just space and choice. She looked at her calendar. Nothing urgent. No pending installs. No client calls. So she responded, sure. Noon? Corinne. Perfect. Comfortable shoes. The next day she wore a cropped denim jacket, linen joggers, and canvas sneakers. No makeup. Hair in a soft twist. Gold hoops small. Understated. When he saw her, Corinne smiled. Didn't peg you for linen joggers. She raised an eyebrow. You wear soft shirts like it's your signature. He chuckled. Touché. The salvage market was tucked between two aging buildings. Wood beams, antique signage, exposed brick. Vendors filled the warehouse with everything from carved doors to weathered shutters and broken chandeliers. Brielle didn't rush. She took her time, running her fingers along the wood grain of an old cabinet door, tapping the leg of a chair to test its strength. Corinne let her lead. No hovering, no guiding, just present. At one point, she paused by a battered writing desk, one leg uneven, top scratched, but still beautiful. This has story, she murmured. He joined her side. You'd bring it back? I'd leave the scars, just clean them up. He looked at her carefully. You do that with people too? She turned slowly, eyes locked. Only the ones who want to be restored. That silence between them didn't need words. They left with two small pieces, an iron lamp base and a drawer face she said would make a perfect wall hook. You hungry? He asked once they reached the sidewalk. A little. There's a cafe nearby. Quiet. Great soup. She nodded. Lead the way. The place had two booths and handwritten menus. Jazz playing low. A server who greeted Corinne by name. I come here to sketch sometimes, he said as they sat. You sketch? He nodded. Mostly nonsense. But it helps. He pulled a notebook from his bag, opened it to a page of doodles and soft-line layouts. She flipped through slowly, paused at a rendering of an empty room with one chair angled toward a window. This one, she said. It's not nonsense. He shrugged. It's how I felt one night, like everything needed to face the light. She looked at him quietly. I understand that more than I should. The food came. They ate slowly, talked about design, but also about life, about their families, about being introverts in loud industries, about the kind of people who drain rooms and the rare ones who refill them. Brielle never mentioned Nolan. Corinne never asked. He didn't seem to be fishing. He just listened, offered stories when they felt safe to share, and let her decide what stayed hers. After they finished, they walked a few blocks in silence, no hand-holding, no declarations, just peace. And for Brielle, that was more intimate than any flirtation. When they reached her stop, she paused. Thanks for today, she said. It felt normal. He nodded. That's the best kind of compliment. She turned, then stopped, looked back. Don't disappear. He didn't smile, didn't promise, just said, I won't. That night, she took the small drawer face they found and placed it on her desk. Later, she'd turn it into a hook. But for now, it stayed untouched, just a reminder that healing didn't always have to be loud, romantic, or rushed. Sometimes, it looked like walking slowly beside someone who didn't try to fix you, just saw you. It started with a headline. Nolan wasn't looking for her. Not that day. He was in a meeting with two investors discussing the rebranding of an upscale residential building in Chicago. The presentation was polished. The numbers made sense. Then one of the partners spoke casually, flipping through the design deck. Still House is doing a concept down the street. Heard they're anchoring 3 storefronts. Nolan's hand froze over his glass. He cleared his throat. You said, Still House. The partner nodded. Yeah, woman-led design studio, soft spaces, emotional architecture. They're blowing up. Another chimed in. Our wives talk about them like it's therapy. The conversation moved on, but Nolan didn't. That night, in his penthouse, Nolan typed "still house" into a browser bar again. He'd done it before, once, twice, maybe more. But this time, he clicked on a video he hadn't seen. A recorded panel. 3 women. Topic: designing for restoration, not display. And there she was. Brielle. Hair in a low twist. Wearing a muted grey blouse, her hands folded in her lap. Listening intently. Then speaking. "Still house exists because we needed a space where softness didn't mean invisibility. Where design didn't shout, but welcomed." She wasn't angry. She wasn't seeking credit. She had simply become her own proof. He watched the entire video, didn't move once. And when it ended, he whispered out loud, "I ruined that." The next morning, he sent a text. It wasn't long. "Nolan, I keep seeing you everywhere. I'm proud of you. I hope you're well." He waited. Nothing. Later that afternoon, he sent another. "Nolan, I miss the way you used to see things. You always noticed what I didn't." Still, nothing. So he called. Voicemail. He didn't leave one. That evening, he wrote a message he didn't send. "I didn't know silence could be this loud. I didn't know you'd stop waiting." He deleted it. Then sat in the dark for a long time. Meanwhile, Brielle was on site in DC, overseeing a still house install at a multi-use cultural center. The space was one of their most meaningful yet, designed by women for women, featuring local materials, low walls for shared work, quiet pods for rest, and an entire section dedicated to restorative reflection. When she finished her final walkthrough, a staff member pulled her aside. "I don't know how you did it," she said, voice soft. "But this space feels like a second chance." Brielle smiled. "I didn't do it alone." Later that night, back in her hotel room, she saw Nolan's texts. 2 of them. She didn't open the thread. She didn't need to. The past didn't call to her the same way anymore. She still remembered his voice, but she no longer waited to hear it. The next morning, Kari met her in the hotel cafe. "He's reaching out again?" she asked gently. Brielle stirred her tea. "Twice now. What are you gonna do?" "Nothing." Kari tilted her head. "You sure?" Brielle looked out the window. DC was waking up. Black coats, quiet footsteps, soft light. "I don't need him to understand it now. I just needed him to not be in the way when I figured it out." When Brielle returned to Newark, a plain envelope waited for her on her studio desk. No return label, no branding. Inside, 1 page, a letter. "Brielle, I see it now. The way you carried peace, and I mistook it for passiveness. The way you led in silence, and I called it weakness. Still house is beautiful. You always were. I'm sorry for every time I made you feel less than. You were the blueprint. I just didn't follow it. Nolan." Brielle read it once. No tears, no flinching. She placed it in a frame, hung it on a small studio wall, beneath her original design sketches and her favorite quote. She labeled the wall, where I started. The framed letter didn't hang for pity. It wasn't displayed for ego. Not to prove anything. Not to invite questions. It was there as a reminder that even the voices who once called her less had to watch her become more. The wall labeled where I started grew slowly. Next to the letter was a photo from her Newark apartment, an old bench she built from discarded wood. Above it, a sticky note with the phrase, "Soft doesn't mean small." It wasn't curated for visitors. Most clients never saw that part of the studio. It was for her, and the women she hired, so they would always remember. Being overlooked wasn't the end. It was just the opening scene. Still House expanded naturally. They opened a quiet showroom in Jersey City. No signs, no glass walls. Just a small space with natural light and curated textures where people could sit, breathe, and remember what stillness felt like. Kari designed the entry, quote, "We don't shout, we build." Requests poured in from non-profits, schools, community spaces. Brielle didn't accept them all. She wasn't chasing exposure. She chose the ones that felt like they needed dignity, and then she trained others to lead the work. Kari now ran a sub-team. Maisa led installations. New interns came in each quarter, mostly women who had once been dismissed, underestimated, or labeled unprofessional for being too calm. Still, House gave them more than work. It gave them mirrors. One afternoon, during a team meeting, a new intern named Zoe asked Brielle, "How do you know when to let something go?" The question was innocent, but it hit. Brielle sat with it, then replied softly, "When it stops feeding your peace." The room went still. Someone wrote it down, and Brielle smiled, because she didn't need applause, just resonance. A week later, they hosted an open studio day for local young designers. Brielle didn't stand at the front, didn't give a keynote. She sat in a circle, jeans and sneakers, listening to women tell their stories. One had been fired for not fitting culture. One had been passed over for a promotion after returning from maternity leave. One had never even applied to a design job, convinced she didn't look the part. Brielle didn't give them advice. She gave them time. Let them sit in her space, feel seen, unrushed, because that's how Still House began. Not in a rush to be loud, but in the need to be real. After the event, Kari sat beside her on the studio steps. "You realize we're doing what no one did for us?" she asked. Brielle leaned back, looking up at the fading sky. "I didn't know what I was building at first. I just needed somewhere to put my pain that didn't look like pain." Kari nodded. "Well, now it looks like power." They both went quiet. But it was the kind of quiet that filled the space, not emptied it. That night, Brielle got another text. Nolan again. Just one line. "You don't need to answer. I just hope you're proud of you." She stared at it, then turned her phone over. She was proud, but not because he said it, because she no longer needed his permission to believe it. Later, she picked up the framed letter again, looked at it one last time, then took it down, wrapped it in soft fabric, tucked it into a drawer marked Archive. The wall stayed empty for a moment. Then Kari brought over a new photo of a small cafe Still House had just redesigned. A corner with two mismatched chairs and a wildflower in a jar. She pinned it up. No caption, just presence. And that was enough. Brielle never liked being asked what she was looking for in a man. She wasn't looking for anything. She was building peace. And if someone showed up who could hold it without knocking things over, she'd notice. But she wasn't scanning the room anymore. Corin didn't come with speeches. He didn't show up with bouquets or offers to help lighten her load. He just stayed present. A text here, a voice note there, an extra hand during install days. No pressure, no performance, just real. They kept working together through the gallery build. It was professional, focused, but between the tasks and timelines, something soft kept unfolding. She began to notice how he looked at furniture the way some people looked at paintings, slowly, respectfully. He noticed when she needed 10 seconds of silence before answering questions, and gave it without asking why. One Thursday evening, after a long final walkthrough, they both stepped outside. The sky was low, clouds full, ready. No rain yet. "You good?" he asked. She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "You?" she returned. "I'm fine, just hungry." She smirked. "You always say that." "Because I'm always hungry." She shook her head, amused. He added, "Want to split something? Just quick food. 10 minutes. She hesitated. Not because she didn't want to, but because she realized it would be their first time. Not working. 10 minutes turned into 40. They sat at a window booth in a small Korean rice shop. Shared banchan dishes, barely touched their phones. No deep questions, no forced vulnerability. He told a story about a client who wanted a 40-foot glass staircase in a studio apartment. She laughed, first from her throat, then deeper. He froze a second. "You have a really good laugh." She looked at him, half suspicious. "I'm serious," he said. "It doesn't sound like it's trying to make anyone feel comfortable, just sounds honest." She blinked. And that, right there, was the first compliment in years that didn't make her brace. When they parted, he didn't ask if she wanted to do it again. He didn't say, let's do this more often. He just looked her in the eye and said, get home safe. And that felt like more care than anything scripted. Later that night, Kari caught her looking distant in the studio. You good? She asked. Brielle nodded. Then after a pause said, you ever meet someone who doesn't say a lot, but somehow still manages to say the right thing? Kari blinked once, then smiled. Oh. Brielle didn't explain, didn't need to, because the way she said someone made it clear. He mattered. Still, House was thriving, but for once, Brielle wasn't pouring everything into it. She made time for walks, for books, for quiet dinners with no work talk. Corinne showed up gently in those spaces, not to interrupt, but to join her where she already was. One Sunday, he invited her to a community build in Brooklyn. Volunteers restoring an old-school library. She hesitated, unsure if she wanted to blur lines again. But when she got there, he was already on a ladder, adjusting shelves. He looked down, smiled. You came. She shrugged. I had a free afternoon. He passed her a paintbrush without ceremony. Then come make it count. They spent hours painting, arranging, unboxing books. At one point, a little girl asked Corinne, are you and her married? He laughed. Brielle choked on air. The girl shrugged. You look like it. Brielle smiled. We're just painting, sweetheart. The girl skipped away, but the moment lingered. That evening, before they parted ways, Corinne walked her to the train. You okay? He asked again, the way he always did. She paused, then replied quietly, you don't rush me. You don't try to fix anything. You don't expect me to be more than I am. He nodded, once. I like who you are. No smile, no performance, just a statement. She looked down, then met his eyes again. Thank you. Brielle wasn't afraid of intimacy. She was afraid of being expected to perform it, to explain her silence, to earn softness through apology, to prove her peace was worth keeping. That's why she kept her world small, clear, structured. She didn't flinch from closeness. She flinched from what came after, when men mistook her quiet for emptiness and filled it with themselves. Corinne never tried to draw her out. He just stayed close enough for her to feel seen, but far enough to let her stay whole. And something in that balance made her want to reach back. Not for validation, for curiosity. She invited him to Stillhouse's next private showing. Not for press, not to impress, just to share what she had built. They walked through the small Jersey City showroom on a Friday evening, after hours. No lights. Just the golden hour sun pouring through the windows and catching on soft wood grain. Corinne stopped at a framed poem tucked into a hallway corner. He read it aloud softly. She does not demand to be heard. She just doesn't shrink when you listen. He turned to her. You wrote this? Brielle nodded. Every space I've ever entered, I wanted that line to be true. Corinne didn't say anything poetic. He just said, you did it. And that was enough. They didn't kiss that night. No hand-holding, no long embrace. Just a quiet goodbye and a low, I'll text you when I get home. But Brielle went to sleep feeling full. Not because she'd given anything away, but because someone had seen her and still left her intact. The next few weeks moved slowly. They shared dinner once, then again. A walk in the park, a slow morning in a museum. Still no labels, no expectations. She told Kari, I don't know what we are. Kari smiled. You don't have to define something to enjoy it. You're safe. That's enough. Brielle nodded. And deep down she knew. This was the first time she'd been in something that wasn't waiting for her to mess it up. One Sunday afternoon, Corinne showed up to her studio. No flowers, no plans. He brought coffee and a small cardboard box. What's this? She asked. He shrugged. Saw it at a vintage shop. Thought of you. She opened it. Inside was a brass door plate, etched softly. Still, whole, here. Her breath caught. She didn't cry, didn't make it sentimental. She just whispered, "I want this on my door." He nodded. "I'll help you mount it." Later that week, while securing it to her office door, he asked, "Was it always this clear, what you needed?" Brielle tightened a screw. "No, I only found clarity after I left the noise." He looked at her hands. "You don't seem afraid anymore." She paused. "I'm not afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of disappearing inside something again." He set the drill down gently. "Then let's not rush. Let's build something where you don't have to disappear to be loved." She didn't say anything, but she placed her hand over his for a second longer than necessary. And in that touch he understood. She wasn't asking him to save her. She was choosing to let him stay. That night, Brielle sat on her sofa with a throw blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked at the old design sketch she'd drawn months ago, labeled Brielle's room, undisturbed. She picked up her pencil and added something new to the margin. A small door, partially open, with light coming through. She smiled. She wasn't building walls anymore. She was designing entries, with boundaries, yes, but also with hope. Brielle didn't talk about Nolan with Corinne, not because she was hiding anything, but because she didn't owe anyone a tour through her past pain. Still, there are moments when a truth wants to breathe, and it finds the right person to inhale it. They were sitting on the rooftop of a low-rise studio in Brooklyn. Still House had just finished a final styling job for an artist's shared workspace. It was quiet up there. Golden hour, mugs of tea, a light breeze brushing against Brielle's shoulders. Corinne sat beside her, legs stretched, hands in his lap. "You ever think you'd be here?" he asked. She looked at the horizon, the way it wrapped around the city like a memory. No, he didn't press. He waited. So she spoke. "I married someone who thought I was furniture," she said softly. "Good for appearances, quiet, in place." Corinne didn't move, didn't shift uncomfortably, just listened. She went on. "I stopped designing for myself the moment I married him. Started shrinking just to keep peace. One day, he laughed at something I said in a room full of people. That was the moment I realized. He didn't forget who I was. He just never valued her." Corinne nodded slowly. She wasn't crying. Her voice didn't tremble, but her hands curled slightly over her knees. "I walked away. No note, no suitcase, just my soul." She paused, took a sip of tea, and then I started again. He finally spoke, quiet and steady. "I didn't know that, but I see it in the way you move." "In what way?" "You build rooms where people feel safe, even when they don't say why they need it." She looked at him. He didn't offer pity, didn't compliment her strength like it was decoration. He just sat with her truth. And that was rare. They stayed there for a while. Not lovers, not yet. Just two people holding space in silence, where honesty didn't need performance to be believed. A week later, Corinne sent her a text. "Corinne, thinking of building a quiet corner in my place. Want to help pick the anchor piece?" She replied after a few minutes. "Brielle, only if you let me make tea while I judge your rug choices." Corinne, deal. That Friday, she came over. No big moment, no heavy tension. His apartment was simple, open, soft walls, a few plants, shelves that held more tools than trophies. She noticed a photo near the window. His late mother, smiling, framed by garden leaves. He noticed her looking. "She taught me how to listen, to plants, to people." Brielle nodded. She raised a good one. They picked the chair together. Rounded edges, deep moss color. The kind of chair that felt like an exhale. Corinne placed it by the window. No words, no declaration. But when he turned back around, Brielle was already in the kitchen, boiling water, setting 2 mugs. That evening, they sat on the floor, sipped ginger tea, played quiet music from a speaker that hummed more than it played. She didn't ask what this meant. He didn't name it either, but when he reached for her hand and she let him hold it, there was nothing rushed about it. No claiming, no chasing, just presence, respect, peace. She exhaled. For the first time in years, not because she needed to release something, but because someone finally knew how to hold what she didn't say out loud. Brielle didn't fall fast. She noticed, observed, waited. Love, for her, had always been too tied to survival. She didn't want to be rescued. She wanted to be met, fully, calmly, without demand. And with Corin, she was beginning to believe that might be possible. He never asked her to be more cheerful. He never commented on how quiet she got when her thoughts filled the room. Instead, he listened to what she didn't say. He noticed when she was overstimulated, overstretched, and simply offered presence. One night, while packing up after a still house install, she reached for a roll of fabric and paused mid-motion. Corin saw her from across the room. "Sit for a minute," he said, not because she looked weak, but because she looked full. She didn't argue, just sat and exhaled. He joined her. No words. His knee barely brushing hers. Sometimes that was all she needed, to be seen without being asked to explain herself. The project wrapped. They didn't celebrate with a party. They didn't post anything online. Instead, Corin invited her over for dinner. Not takeout. Real food. He cooked. From scratch. "Pasta," he said, "but don't expect anything Michelin." When she walked in, the kitchen smelled like garlic and butter. A jazz record played softly in the background. He wore a simple shirt, sleeves rolled. She laughed the minute she saw him wiping flour off his arm. "You bake now too?" I panicked. He grinned. Thought bread might make this less awkward. She stepped inside, still smiling. It's not awkward. And it wasn't. They ate on the couch. She curled one leg underneath her. He passed the wine. They talked about their childhoods, favorite dishes, worst design fails. She told him about the time she installed floating shelves backward. He told her about a client who once tried to paint an entire living room in metallic black. "I still dream about it sometimes," he joked. She laughed until she nearly spilled her drink. After dinner, he didn't make a move, didn't lean in like a scene from a movie. He simply cleaned the plates, refilled her glass, and joined her again. That's when she turned and asked, "Have you ever been in love where you had to earn the right to be heard?" He was quiet for a moment. "Not love, but I've been in rooms where my silence cost me respect." She nodded. "It's different when you're a woman. People think silence means absence." He looked at her directly. "But yours holds everything." He reached for her hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. She leaned her head against his shoulder. And for the first time in years, she thought, "I'm not afraid of what this could become." Because for once, it didn't feel like she'd disappear into someone. It felt like she might finally build something beside them. Over the following weeks, they didn't rush. They shared lunches, random texts, late-night voice notes. He'd send her photos of design details he spotted in old buildings. She'd send him audio clips of wind chimes from site visits. One morning, she arrived at the studio and found a box at her desk. Inside was a hand-carved pencil holder made from salvaged cherry wood. A note inside. "You said you wanted to hold peace in the small things." This felt right. No signature. Just him. Kari walked in moments later and smiled when she saw it. "That man is not playing with you." Brielle just placed the pencil holder on her desk, right beside the mug she'd used for years. No fanfare, no announcement. But when she touched it again that afternoon, she whispered under her breath, "Thank you for seeing me before I needed to be impressive." Still House was still her first love. But now, she had room to consider what it might look like to build a second kind. Not out of fear, not out of emptiness, but from overflow. The article dropped on a Tuesday. It wasn't flashy, not a celebrity profile, not a viral think piece. It was a quiet, deeply written feature in a respected architectural journal, Designing. Wholeness, Still House, the studio that's changing how we feel space. Nolan wasn't subscribed to the journal, but his head of interiors forwarded it with the subject line, "Look who made cover story." He clicked. There she was, Brielle, standing in a sunlit project site, hands in her pockets, hair pulled back, wearing a linen set and soft sneakers. But it wasn't the photo that caught his breath. It was the caption. Brielle Linton, founder of Still House, photographed alongside architect Corinne Hayes in one of their collaborative healing space designs. He stared at the image. They weren't holding hands. There was no romance announced. But something about the ease in their bodies, the calm way she leaned slightly toward Corinne, said more than any headline could. She wasn't reclaiming space anymore. She was rooted in it. The article quoted her, "We don't design for performance, we design for restoration. If you feel safe, we've succeeded." Another line hit harder. Still House was never about revenge. It was about remembering I could take up space without being framed by someone else's ego. Nolan closed the tab, sat in silence. His penthouse looked sharper than ever, but none of it felt lived in. Across the city, Brielle had no idea he'd seen the piece. She was reviewing color samples for a healing center in Baltimore. Corinne sat across from her, quietly drawing bench measurements on his tablet. Every so often, their eyes met. A nod here, a small smile there. No rush, no games, just partnership. Steady, mutual, alive. That evening, Corinne invited her to dinner. Nothing fancy, just soup and warm bread in his apartment. After they ate, they sat on the floor beside the new chair they'd picked together weeks ago. She leaned against it, sipping tea. He reached for a blanket, draped it across her legs without saying a word. Then he said, "People are talking about the article." She glanced at him. "You read it?" "I did." "Was it too much?" "No," he replied. "It was honest." She paused, then asked, "Did you mind being pictured with me?" He laughed lightly. "Only part I minded was they didn't mention how bad I am at posing." I blinked like 6 times. She smiled, wide, unburdened. "You didn't look nervous." "I wasn't. Not with you." Later that night, as she was about to leave, he walked her to the door. But she didn't reach for the handle. She stood there, looking at him, soft, sure. "I don't know where this is going," she said, voice steady. "And I don't want to lose myself figuring it out." "You won't," Corinne said. "I'm not here to shrink you. I'm just here if you want someone steady beside you while you keep expanding." She didn't answer right away, but she stepped forward, placed a kiss on his cheek, not as a signal of anything owed, but as a quiet choice, and that was more real than any promise. The next morning, she woke to a message from Kari. "You're trending." Quietly, "But you are." Brielle blinked, rubbed her eyes and smiled faintly, then got up, made her tea, and started her day. Because she hadn't built Still House to trend. She built it so she'd never again need permission to feel safe inside her own skin. A month after the article, Still House hosted its first private event. It wasn't a gala, not a launch party. It was a soft opening for their latest project, a quiet women's retreat center just outside Nyack. Brielle walked the halls barefoot that morning, checking textures, testing light, breathing in the rooms like one breathes in peace. She wore a soft cream dress and brass earrings that moved when she did. No entourage, no announcement, just presence. The clients arrived around noon. So did press, just enough to document, not distract. Among the small crowd was someone no one expected, Nolan Creed. He didn't make a scene. He walked in like a guest, signed the registry like everyone else, took a slow walk through the atrium lined with dried lavender and acoustic wood panels. He saw her from across the room. She was talking to 2 design students. Her voice, calm. Her smile, centered. She hadn't frozen when she saw him. She hadn't looked away either. When she approached, he straightened a little. "Brielle." She nodded. "Mr. Creed." He blinked at the title, then swallowed it. "This place." He began. "It feels like air, like you walk in and your shoulders drop." "That's what it's for," she said. He nodded slowly. "I read the article. I followed the projects. I know I was the last to see it, but I see it now." She didn't flinch, didn't soften either. "You don't have to explain," she said. "I want to. You already did. When you spoke over me, when you laughed." "I was insecure," he confessed. She nodded once. I know. I miss you. I don't. He looked down, not in shame, just in recognition. You were the only person who saw me before the world did, she continued. But I had to stop being seen only when it served you. He didn't argue. Was it ever real? He asked. Her eyes softened. Parts were. But real love doesn't ask you to shrink or disappear. He nodded. I wanted to say thank you, he said, for building something so honest. She held his gaze. You don't owe me thanks. You owe yourself truth. A bell chimed from the center courtyard. The sound was warm, grounding. She excused herself. He watched her walk away, not with regret, with clarity. She hadn't become something new. She had returned to herself. That night, Brielle sat with Corin by the fire pit in the retreat's garden. The air was cool, the flames gentle. He handed her a mug of warm cider. You good? He asked. I am. Was it weird? No. It was quiet. And I needed that. She sipped, then added, I'm not angry. I just no longer need to make myself small so someone else feels big. Corin didn't try to fix it. He just nodded, held her hand under the blanket. And that was enough. 2 weeks later, Brielle placed Nolan's old letter, the one he'd once sent months ago, into a small wooden frame. She hung it in the still house office, near the design samples. Underneath, she added a plaque. Not all pain ends in rage, some ends in purpose. The last scene. A letter slid across her new studio desk. It was from the same design magazine that once gave her a back-page feature. Now they wanted her for the cover. Title, still. Woman. Empire. She didn't smile for applause. She smiled for herself, because the woman once dismissed as a burden now hired others, mentored students, healed clients, and loved a man who saw her completely, quiet, bold, soft and steady. Not because she had something to prove, but because she finally knew she never needed fixing. She only needed space to grow. If this story moved you, if you saw pieces of yourself in Brielle's journey, or if you've ever been dismissed, doubted or underestimated, don't leave quietly. Tap like to show your support for women who choose peace over approval. Drop a comment below. What was your favorite moment? What would you have done if you were Brielle? Share this video with someone who needs the reminder you don't need permission to start again. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories for more powerful love, healing and redemption stories that speak to your soul. Because on this channel, we don't tell stories for noise. We tell them for impact. You belong here.